political analyst, Susan Booysen, joins me now in studio. And of course, speaking at that particular celebration, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa saying that there is no beef between him and his predecessor, Jacob Zuma. He says the ANC is focused on unification, and inviting Zuma to the party's anniversary celebrations is proof of this. Let's speak to Susan Booysen. Thank you so much, Prof, for your time tonight. You know, we heard today, and I suppose in the lead up to this, about the ANC's incredible history as a liberation movement. As it stands today, is the ANC that we're seeing the ANC of 1994, the ANC of pre-1994?
I think we have indeed seen many different ANCs consistently in government, consistently reinventing and positioning itself as a liberation party. And the task of liberation is indeed so big that they can almost be guaranteed to have a liberation task for many years to come. But we have definitely seen several different ANCs. And what we see taking place in this week is a serious attempt to reborn, to get a rebirth of the ANC, to get one that is now united again, that is strongly anti-corruption, and yet the beast in its own belly is this contradiction. It's a very contradictory birth. The contradiction of so many people who are tainted by ANC, who have clouds over their heads, but who will in all likelihood say there are no convictions against them, and they are still the subjects of forging this unity with. So they will still be in the ANC, and this new ANC is an ANC that has jumped over in bit more over a year from around 45% to around 60% in opinion polls. So it's a very contradictory movement and process that we see unfolding now.
Well, the words renewal, the words unity are certainly not new when it comes to the ANC trying to reinvent itself. But it seems that, you know, the fact that they consistently have to go back to it, does it mean that the strategy doesn't work the first time around, or that they just continuously having to renew from whatever? I'm not sure, you know.
Yes, I think with the ANC, yes, especially in the last year, we've seen so much disunity and the need to reinvent and to assure people there is unity, and hopefully in that process creates more unity, because there are many people on the ground who definitely do not believe that there is unity. You know, but this is also an issue of a political party and former liberation movement party, if you like, that stays in power for a very long time. It really becomes a democracy in own right. It forms, it sheds members, it gets split off parties, and they fight, and then they reunite, and they get incorporated again, like we've seen in the COPE process. The bulk of those people have been reincorporated in the ANC. And so it sheds and it regroups all the time. And it's almost a self-sustained type of alternative democracy, not the one that we see operating in multi-party elections and being lifted from power. It stays in power, but a different iteration of this party stays in power.
Do pictures of President Cyril Ramaphosa alongside former President Jacob Zuma cutting the cake, or as we're seeing here, you know, President Cyril Ramaphosa alongside Sihlezi Kalala, do those kind of pictures help reinforce this message of unity? Is it something believable?
You know, it definitely helps to reinforce or to generate that idea that there is unity, that there is cooperation, and there is at different levels. We know in KwaZulu-Natal, for example, there is much better cooperation with the Ramaphosas in the ANC that has taken shape over the last year. That is much improved on what it was. But then again, if we look at enthusiasm and turnout at some events on the ground today, then one wonders whether everybody in the branches on the ground have really been doing sufficient and convinced, committed mobilization in this process.
And you bring me to my point, because the crowd in Durban certainly doesn't seem to have bought that story of unity, at least if we look at the response that they had to what was going on that podium today.
Yes, it is definitely, we remain to be convinced that this unity drive and belief in that Cyril Ramaphosa is the new ANC, and that has really taken root. So a lot of convincing needs to take place. And then, of course, we get these two beasts of one, the ANC, and the conversions that still have to be taking place inside, and then a general electorate that seems to be endorsing and carrying Ramaphosa forward on this belief that yes, he is the person who can absolutely do a lot about corruption and taking South Africa back to pre-capture days, pre-mass capture days. But it's these different ANC beings that still have to gel.
We're heading into a year, of course, where the terrain will be probably the most contested it's been in terms of the political landscape. When we look ahead to this weekend, where the ANC will also be talking about its manifesto, what do you think needs to come out of it in order to really win over not just the loyalists that stayed home in the last elections, but to also potentially get new voters for the party?
And incredibly much new younger voters, a new generation coming in, and that is where the ANC tries to make their narrative of radical economic transformation much more of its own, to capture that youth sentiment, decoloniality, and a new era in South African politics, if not global politics. ANC tries to make that its own and to bring young people in. ANC is, of course, helped massively by the fact that opposition parties are really not faring better than the ANC, and that South Africans love their elections. So the ANC may still be redeemed by that, but in the meantime, if I read between the lines, we see the two dual themes of transformation and jobs unavoidably being central to that manifesto and what will be happening there. And then transformation will also have to be related to getting rid of corruption. And then the great test is going to be the ANC plays the game of postponing the release of the list. But there's much explanation, I think, will have to be done when we get to the point, and many other previous tainted people and ANC senior leaders even may still be on that list on the grounds that they haven't had convictions.
For the vote of those young people then, who you say, of course, prime land for any political party that wants to grow in this election, is the 20% representation that has been set by the ANC for young people, is that enough?
Actually not, but then we also do not know. I don't think the president gave the exact definition of young, but that is very, excuse me, that is indeed very small. And given that the ANC is, through all of its detours in its leadership, it's really well inhabited by older people. It will take a lot of convincing to get rid of more of the older leaders, and then the older leaders will try to take over the narrative that speaks to younger people, but it will not carry enough weight. And the ANC has really been lacking in that regard, that it has not grown sufficient young, by truly young standards, not
39.5.
Not jump, yes, and not jump from youth league into the veterans league.
All right, Professor Booysen, let's leave it there for tonight. Professor Susan Booysen giving us her take on this particular story tonight.